Ashley Singh, the Chief Information Officer of Sanlam Health and Corporate. Welcome to the 2025 EBNet Evolutionaries Conference.
Thanks, Leon. Thanks for having me, and I'm excited to have this discussion with you on one of my favorite topics.
Not just a favorite topic, I'm sure, but an incredibly important topic in this day and age, as technology has opened borders. And just like we protect ourselves and our homes with security from the, call it, local community, there's no boundaries in terms of who can ultimately harm us through the cyber world. So I'd like to start off by actually asking you the direct question, is how serious is cybersecurity for pension funds in particular?
Thanks, Leon. Great question, and quite late, and this is the great place to start. So it's extremely important, and it's becoming extremely more difficult. Our cyber criminals are becoming more nefarious, and each and every day that it passes on, there's smarter tooling, there's smarter ways to get through our environment. Unlike a physical environment where you can put up a security gates and have patrolling, and that remains the standard. The standards for cybersecurity and the protection we need continues to evolve. AI, other events in the industry are making it more difficult, and pension funds in particular are becoming a crown jewels. And the reason for that is these nefarious characters or actors, if you would, threat actors as we call them in the industry, are targeting pension funds because A, they see it as a large pot of money that an individual comes into or has access to, and two, they view that because these are typically pensioners, they may not be most familiar with how to safeguard themselves from a technology perspective. You wouldn't necessarily put those two and two together. So they become a prime suspect and a prime pool for these activities.
And it's also interesting because it's a bit of a double-sided coin, because we've all innovated in the industry to enhance user experience for those same pensioners or members of the funds by providing electronic means to be it transacts, to store data, whatever it might be. Yet that in its own right has opened up a greater risk. So how do you weigh the one up relative to the other?
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, the greater we change and want things faster, the greater risk we introduce. So, firstly, we as the administrators or the ones that are in charge of these pension schemes need to ensure that our environment is extremely robust. So, as much as we introduce these toolings, we actually, in parallel in that deployment schedule or development framework, we actually secure the environment. We ensure that we introduce things such as multi-factor authentication, which allows us an extra level of protection. We look for fraudulent behavior or behavior that doesn't match what we expect, and we flag it up. So we invest heavily in these threat patterns, if you would. However, the key component comes in here, and what the nefarious actors are doing is simulating behavior, whereas they can follow you around, try and guess your passwords, and then actually simulate you to get through the environment. So the companies do a lot in terms of protection, as I mentioned, and because we want to make things simpler, easier, and better. But we've also got to educate our pensioners of how to be more safe.
But what is it that's at risk at the end of the day? So let's take a scenario, two scenarios, one of a member of a medical scheme, another one being a member of a pension fund. What is it of mine that is ultimately at risk with these nefarious characters?
So let's start with pension, right? So on the pension component, it could be if you're getting a monthly deduction, we take off 10 Rand off that. So you create a dual beneficiary and 10 Rand goes to a different account. It might seem negligible, so you don't notice, and that pulls up over time. Or if it's a large lump sum of money, we do a spearheaded attack, and we withdraw that large sum of money. We disparate it across different bank accounts across the world that you can't trace back, and then those threat actors have the funds. So that's on the pension fund. On the medical side, there's not those big components there. So what it is it's actually twofold. One, if we get your status or your condition, we can use that to our benefit. So for example, some people are naturally very sensitive around the HIV statuses, etc. If we threaten to make that public knowledge, which is against our current constitution, those that are in that position will be more susceptible to blackmail. So we use those conditions against you. And then also we could use those conditions to predict your behavior or penetrate your account on another perspective. So that's the one part, the social engineering part. And then the other part is similar on your deductions. We take a component of that deduction and put it to a different account and start, start building up a bank account of users from there.
And to be clear, the we that you're talking about, these aren't local guys sitting in some office here in Johannesburg or in Cape Town. These could be guys sitting anywhere ultimately in the world.
Yeah, and you know why the threat landscape has changed so fundamentally, is that in the past you would assume you'd need a massive computer science degree, or you need to be extremely good in computers to come up with this activity and then this threat to launch into the environment. Whereas now in the dark web, individuals can buy a packaged threat application, even if they know nothing about computers, and use that application to target individuals. So the number of criminals has just expanded, and their skill set is not really key at this point in time. And B, you're right, they could be sitting in all parts of the country. The most remote parts of the country, the better, because the threat detection is less.
I found it fascinating the other day. I was listening to a podcast with an ethical hacker, and they were showing some of the hardware that you can buy on the internet now at a fairly cheap rate that can infiltrate your phone or your laptop or whatever it is, and you don't know the people are there. You have absolutely no idea that they are either spying on you or downloading your data or watching your keystrokes, whatever that might be. So it's quite frightening from that perspective. But bringing it back down to pension fund trustees and their responsibility to ultimately protect their members' data and assets at the end of the day. So we have Joint Standard 2 that has now been brought to the fore by the FSCA and the Prudential Authority. And I think a lot of trustees have felt overwhelmed because they're not cyber security experts. Can you comment on that? What should trustees be doing in order to protect their members?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the standards are quite layered, and in terms and rightfully so. So trustees need to ensure that their systems, their processes, those that are employed to actually manage that, or the skill sets they have on that, are the best in the industry. They understand this. You've got to keep your skills relevant. You can't have a cyber professional of, call it 20 years ago, still being relevant in today's day and age. If you've got the right skill set, they then make the implementation of the act seamless. So in our environment at Sanlam, we've got some of the best. We really hunt for the best people in this industry. So the implementation of these standards becomes quite seamless for us. So that's the one part, having the right skills. And then equally important is investing in technology. Large times, companies, organizations normally don't always put front of mind the investment in safety because it's not seen as a revenue generation. But in here, and in particularly for our administrators and our schemes and our pension providers, is that we need to ensure that the investment in cybersecurity is in the right technology and gives us the right level of security. So it's a balancing act.
So the regulators have come out with a framework, and that framework applies to financial institutions. And you, as Sanlam, are equally a financial institution as a business, as is your umbrella fund as a legal entity, and having trustees govern that fund, just like any other standalone fund in the country. So in that respect, the differentiation between a fund and its governing body and a service provider and its, call it, executive that runs that business. Can you comment on the responsibility of either? Because the way that I see it is the pension funds need to have oversight over people like a Sanlam and others within the market. You are ultimately accountable as the service provider to build a robust security framework. They need to ensure that you have indeed done that. And if you have not, and they're not comfortable, they should take action ultimately in that regard.
Spot on, Leon. So that's why it's, in the same analogy, it's hand in glove. It has to work hand in glove, and it has to be extremely transparent. So what we do as the providers or the financial institutions is to ensure that our trustees are fully aware of what we're doing, what are the programs we've got, what are some of the key metrics, what are some of the key metrics that can give them confidence that we are implementing what we say we're implementing. That's important. Regular feedback in terms of this is what the act says, this is how we're protecting our environment, these are the metrics to show that we've got maturity and we're progressing, and then constant checks and tests. But it's a hand in glove. It's hand in glove in terms of creating that awareness, creating that education, and being transparent on all information that we've got.
So can you, without getting too technical, give a couple of examples of the kind of cybersecurity practices that can be implemented within a business like yours that the trustees should seek to understand or to ensure that you have in place?
Sure. So probably the two easiest ones that's not too technical is one that we must ensure that we've got something called two-factor authentication. So when at a very rudimentary level, when a pensioner logs on, there mustn't just be one level that authenticates him. There must be two levels. So that's an easy one. Ways to do that is, I log in with my username and password. Thereafter, I get a message on my phone that says, you've now trying to log on to your account. Here's your temporary OTP, one-time password to log on. So that's an easy, straightforward one that most companies do, and you can see it. The second one is to ensure that the tests that happen in an environment, we call them pen test or cyber tests. We ensure that is administered at a certain cadence within the company, but importantly, the results of those tests are then circulated to the trustees, and they can say what the vulnerabilities are. Are there any vulnerabilities that I should be aware of, and how do we sort of take it forward? So I would look for those two easy ones. One, a bit more what you can touch and feel, and two, reviewing those security reports and looking for the red, amber, green, amber items that are there.
So some people in the market have been hesitant to share their penetration testing results. Now, they would say that's because it actually compromises their security. Some will say that they're not being transparent and therefore there might be problems. How do we find a balance in that respect?
Yeah, there's got to be a trust on both parties. The hand and glove analogy again. The trustees, what's discussed and what's shared in those meetings must have a level of confidentiality and must have a level of rigor. So I believe it must be shared in those sessions. I believe in tangent with that, it must be shared with what are we doing. So we know, because there'll always be new vulnerabilities. Next week, the following week, there'll be a new vulnerability. We've picked up this vulnerability. This is our plan, and this is how we're going to remediate it. So that's the transparency that we implement, and one that I recommend for the industry.
And I also think trustees don't appreciate yet the protections that are already in place. So it's not a case that they are completely exposed. I mean, like every business has a certain level of protection. It's more a case of understanding and determining whether indeed it's sufficient and that everyone's living up to the standards, which I'm assuming most people do. Because all of that, call it either hardware or software, is available for businesses to use. But now I'm going to raise who I believe is the greatest point of risk, which is the human that's busy 100%. With all of the equipment. I've received myself a number of emails recently asking me to click on a link that's coming from a person whom I know and their actual email address. Now, I would say 6 months ago, I would have clicked on that link. I've become a lot more aware. So I think that the biggest challenge here is the resilience side of things. It's the testing of the business continuity plans, and that, do we take those seriously? Have we implemented that? And can we get our customers back up and running as quickly as possible? But also, how are we training our staff? And a lot of the people in the market that I've spoken to have responded to say, oh, we're too busy. Or we don't want to spend any more and things like that. Yet it's so critical. So what do you guys do at Sanlam in that regard, and what's your view ultimately on the human in the value chain?
Spot on, Luana. I mean, I'm so glad you've raised this point. You're 100% correct. The weakest link in this chain of cyber protection is human. So there's many things we do. The first thing we do is massive education. So we roll out training programs, mandatory training programs to the organization. This is also something that is in industry practice, but that's not good enough. So what we do as well is that we actually do simulated attacks. We call that simulated phishing attacks, where to our employees, we say, here's an email from the finance director asking you to click on this link to view your payslip or other activities that seem a bit, almost too good to be true. When they click on it, we know that they failed the test, and then we educate them. So it's targeted training, targeted intervention. And we also put small changes in it, and we're getting quite clever. So as an example, when they read the email, it's very small nuances you got to look at to make it to sort of show you that it's a fake. It could be spelling Sanlam wrong, or it could be a full stop at the end of Sanlam as an example. So we become very strong in these tests. So our phishing attack gives us a level of how resilient and educated our team is. We then do targeted initiatives of individuals that fail or continuously fail a test. And if an individual is, just doesn't have it in them to ward off these attacks, we look to redeploy them to an area where they're not so at the forefront of being susceptible. So that's the seriousness we take this into. But then secondly, we must show this to our trustees. Our trustees must see the level of our phishing attack stats. How well are we progressing? What are we doing with those that are not, are failing more than once or twice? And then secondly is what I love to do in forums like this is to educate our community, because as much as the employees are a weak cog in the link, similarly, the ones that actually log on, the actual pensioners, anyone that actually touches the system, it could even be the trustees themselves or the brokers, the third parties. Education on them and a similar rigor is required.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, many trustees of pension funds, or if there's a pensioner trustee, they would be logging in from a Gmail account or from wherever, and who knows what's coming through from that perspective. So the awareness and the resilience of all parties is ultimately key. So next two questions ultimately. You spoke about the kind of testing that you do with staff, which is critical. But what I have found is that the culture isn't always there to take it seriously, to complete it, and then to review indeed who has done it, who hasn't done it, who's passed, who hasn't passed, and that at the very least, that's not filtering up to, call it, executive management at all times. And to me, this should be an agenda item for all executives to have oversight on, because of the world we now live in. It's not a sideshow thing; it's a main, function that we have. So, your thoughts in that regard?
Yeah, 100%. It has to be driven. I mean, most organizations have a group risk board where the most senior of the individuals are present. That this item and the non-compliance for this has to roll up there. Once it rolls up to that forum for visibility, the behaviors down the line start to manifest, and repeat offenders' name gets out in lights for the wrong reasons. So it has to be mandated at the top. It's got to be checked. It's got to be visible at that level, and then consequence action down the line. So that's a key one for me, where it must sit at the group risk board.
So in that regard, who is responsible for cybersecurity? The IT department and the chief investment officer, the executive of a business, or in the case of a pension fund, the trustees, or is it everybody?
Leon, great question. This is one of the questions in our exams as well. For those that fully in the training, it is everybody. Cyber is not the responsibility of any one person, because all of us have a role to play. It's that ecosystem that gives us cyber resilience.
So actually, we come from a past of inequality in South Africa, and part of building a South Africa for the future that's there for all South African citizens is we need to generate growth. And a big part of growth in this picture is not just the continued success of big institutions like the Sanlams, but also in order to create jobs, the entrepreneurial businesses out there. Now, for a lot of them, this might seem like an awful lot of PT and cost. So how serious is it? I mean, how can an entrepreneurial small business put in place a strong cybersecurity framework without, it being taking over the business?
Yeah, spot on, Leon. You've got to balance the two very carefully. And you're right, the cost of cyber and the skills for cyber is challenging, especially for the entrepreneurial spirit that you mentioned. My advice would be to have as least, as your business grows, have cyber resilience for that point in time. You're never going to have, for a small up and coming business, to have the nth level of protection needed. But what you can do is, for the protocols that you put in place, you can then put cyber on top of that. So as an example, if you need more manual processes, that's okay, because then that also alleviates the need for massive cyber. So you might be a little bit more manual heavy. Second thing is, you would then have to balance the needs for what are my vulnerabilities today? And that's what they would almost never know in coming up from that particular SMME environment. I would advise having a initial assessment done by one of our SME providers as well that understand cyber, not the most massive company, that understand cyber, that are certified in cyber to do an assessment of the landscape. Then you know what you're working with and then build from there, because it all starts with education and an as-is assessment. So mine would be look for what's fit for purpose for today, but leverage off a similar SMME in cyber to do an assessment. And a lot of these companies do their initial assessment for free.
Okay, good. Now, final question before I let you have the last word is AI is here. AI is here to stay. I mean, I've already become a convert. I feel as I can do 20 times as much as I used to because of my AI partnership that I have going. AI is just going to accelerate the risk or increase the risk. Computing power is increasing exponentially. So is this a game that we can win?
Yes, it's a game we can win 100%. And the reason we can win this game is because we own the game. And, in a lot of the talks that I do as well, AI and what it can bring and the supercomputing power that you spoke about is an augmentation of us. So it's like the glasses I'm wearing right now. In the past, I couldn't see clearly. I'm wearing glasses now, I can see clearly. We must use AI responsibly and for its targeted purposes, with us being the architects, the founders, and the movement of it. I believe responsible use of AI, I believe using AI as an augmentation rather than as a replacement will give us the ability to manage the risk and obviously manage the benefits.
But how does that work when the AI starts to already thinks quicker than us and already starts having almost a conscience in terms of protection of itself?
So it's you do that by the model that it's learned. So remember, all AIs have something called AI hallucination, right? Where it's never going to be 100%. In fact, a calculator is better in maths than AI because of the probability theory, right? So that's the first gap you've got in AI. And because of that probability that AI relies on, whereas humans have the ability on the finite answers versus the probability, it'll always rely on a super brain or a human touch for that knowledge or that separation of what is AI hallucination or what could be real versus what is real. And that's where the power comes in.
What's amazing as I'm listening to you. I mean, historically, we would have businesses that were, I don't know, I'm from an investment background. So you'd have your investment guys, your admin guys, your marketing guys, and then you'd have your ops IT that were there to support and make sure everyone can do their work. The role of that person or people now within the business is you actually integral to the value creation and delivery to the customer. That's how the world has evolved over time. And I'm sure you see that in the context of Sanlam and the role that you guys now play in that value chain.
Yeah, 100%. And also the power, what I love most about AI is it democratizes technology, it democratizes power, whereas in the future, everyone will be able to work in a technology type environment and contribute to the value of what technology can bring. And that for me is the warm bread.
Okay, well, on that note, you have the last word because it is your talk for today. So would you like to leave anything with our viewers just in terms of how they should ultimately not just approach but view cybersecurity and AI in their futures?
Yeah. Thanks, Leon. So the last word from me is embrace it. Um, uh, be excited for what's on our doorstep. This is a dawn of a new era for us as a society. There's much more benefits than there are negatives, but do it responsibly. Be aware of what the risks are. As we spoke about in today's talk, that we are the weakest link. Be cautious, be protective, but embrace it.
Ashley Singh, thank you so much for those wise words, and we thank you for joining us at the conference.
Thank you, Leon. It's a pleasure talking to you.
That was Ashley Singh, Chief Information Officer of Sanlam Health and Corporate.